Hey, what's up guys? Hardleg Joe here with the profile for my Rikka Control deck, a lovely lot of lady plants that stuns and stomps with several traps. Also, tributing is involved. If you want to see this thing in action, check out the main What a Deck video, linked down in the description. There I'll be playing duels against random opponents on YGOPro. Otherwise here, I'm just going to be going over all the cards and explaining what they do. We got one Hellbore and three Snow White, a Rikka Honest and three girls that search alright, a single Cyclamen and a trio of Prim. We play exclusively plants, Lone Fire fits right in. Evil Thorn and Petal are no-brainers too. 1/4/1 summons them both, called by ensures they go through. Rikka got a Roto, which we play 3 of, plus a single Twin Twister and the spell I love. Finally 2 Trank and 3 Rikka Sheet, and then this old plant counter trap, which is real neat. Cha! Anyway, the extra deck has 1 Titanic Dong, 2 Sad Ladies, 1 Ding Dong Didgeridoo, 1 Neutral Lady, a Spell Speed 4 Board Wipe, Bahama Shark, Corn Chip, 2 Happy Ladies, Rada's Pet Frog, a single Confused Sylvan who's still around in 2020 for some reason, Big Luster Soldier Meister, a Smelly Girl, and some kind of Pikachu ball. The side deck I'll go over in a bit. So, Rikka, formerly known as Snowflower. If you don't know, they're a fairly new archetype of water plant monsters themed around tributing. Many of their monster effects require you to tribute plants in order to activate them, and most of their spell traps are phrased like this. When you activate this card, do a thing. Also, you can tribute a plant maybe, and then you can do that same thing, but better. Their best card, in my opinion, and one that doesn't follow that pattern, is Rikka Flurries, a continuous spell that says once per turn, if you tribute a Rikka monster, you can make your opponent tribute one monster they control. It's actually phrased that way, which is pretty significant. The spell doesn't tribute their monster, it forces your opponent to tribute a monster, which, if I'm not mistaken, has the same force of removal as a kaiju. Because of that, my plan with this deck is basically to get Flurries out as fast as possible, and then activate its effect over and over again on both players' turns until my opponent runs out of monsters. This is facilitated by the other traps we play, which allow us to tribute Rikkas during our opponent's turn. Pollinosis is a non-archetype counter trap, which lets you tribute a plant in order to negate a summon, or the activation of a spell trap. Rikka Tranquility is basically back to the front for Rikkas on its own, but if you tribute a monster when you activate it, you can summon an additional monster from the graveyard, and that bonus monster can be any plant, not just one of the archetype. Perhaps their best trap, though, is Rikka Sheet. On its own, it has a weird effect where you can target a monster and neither player can activate its effects. It doesn't negate the effects, it just stops players from even attempting to activate them, which means it's really good against ignition effects and really bad against most trigger effects. Regardless, you mostly want it for the rest of its text, which says if you tribute a plant when you activate this, you can take control of the monster you target until the end of the turn. Also, it becomes a plant, which means you can tribute it to activate all your shit. So imagine this if you will. You end on one monster, plus this, Flurries, and Tranquility. Your opponent summons 2 monsters. You immediately steal one with Sheet, and then because you tributed a Rikka to activate it, Flurries forces them to tribute their other monster. Then you can tribute the monster you just stole with this to not only summon back the Rikka from earlier, but also a bonus monster as well. Not only have you prevented your opponent from playing, but you've just gone +1 in the process. Best of all, because of how recursive this deck is and how much search power it has, you can usually repeat this process again next turn, but with a powerful Ixie to boot. It's not exactly meta or anything, I mean this is a 4-card combo we're talking about, but it does represent a solid win condition, which puts it above most casual decks. Plus, every part of this combo is searchable and repeatable, which gives the archetype a lot of potential if they ever get more support. As for what makes Rikka so recursive, it's built on a foundation of Petal. This tiny thing is basically Treeborn Frog, but it searches. Once per turn, you can add a Rikka monster from your deck to your hand, and during the end of your opponent's turn, if this is in the grave and you don't control a non-plant monster, you can summon this. meaning as long as you can stall for one turn, this is an easy +2 with the start of every subsequent turn, netting you a free monster on board as well as a free search. Most of the time, you'll be using that search for Mudan. When this is summoned by the effect of a plant monster, you can search any Rikka spell trap. And this thing can summon itself by tributing any plant monster, meaning you can summon Petal, search this, then tribute Petal for this, and get whatever trap you need without ever using your normal summon. If you already have Mudan in hand, then you can use this search for Snowdrop. This is a level 8, and if it's in your hand, you can tribute a plant you control to summon this, along with any other plant from your hand. So, you can tribute your Petal, and then get Mudan plus a friend. Once on the field, Snowgo has a second effect, where she can target any plant on the field, and all plants you control become the same level as it. Since she's a level 8, that means you can always make rank 8s, though using her summon effect locks you into just plants. Fortunately, they have a pretty sweet rank 8 plant for a boss monster. Teardrop can detach during either player's turn to target a monster on the field and tribute it, which adds even more removal to your arsenal, along with a beefy 2800 attack. Now, one thing that makes my version of this deck kind of different from most Rikka builds I've seen online is that I don't focus on making this. A lot of the more combo-oriented versions of the deck try to turbo out Teardrop, but in this trap-heavy build, I find it's usually better to leave 2 plants on board. One you can tribute with Sheet or Gnosis to activate Flurries, and a second one to act as a defense wall, so you aren't helpless if your opponent can play through your disruption. As such, I would say that if you can only get 2 monsters on board, don't go for Teardrop unless you have literally no traps to activate. Instead, save Teardrop for when you can get 3 monsters on board. Fortunately, that isn't too hard in this deck, thanks to Primula and Evil Thorn. Prim is pretty simple, it has a level modulation effect, which can be useful, but I mostly play it because if it's in your hand, and you tribute a plant, you can special summon it. It's free real estate. Evil Thorn, meanwhile, is a little trickier. All it can do is tribute itself to summon 2 more copies of itself from the deck, which doesn't seem super synergistic at first, but there's a lot of neat combos you can do with this. Like if you open with just Thorn and Prim, you can still get your play starter. She will summon herself when you tribute Thorn, meaning you'll have 3 monsters on board, 2 to make the Aromage link, and 1 to tribute off in order to get this. You can also use Snow Girl to summon this out of your hand, since she could just summon any plant, and then use her effect to make both of these level 8, allowing it to end on both the Ixie and a 2600 booty. Same thing if you open with Snowdrop and Lonefire, since Lonefire can just tribute itself to get Evil Thorns. Though at that point, you're wading dangerously deep into Nibiru territory. There's a couple other neat things you can do with this, but I think you're starting to get the point, and that's really what I'm here for, just to explain the core of the deck. Everything else in here is either here to boost consistency, or to act as a small toolbox, or it's just a generic tech card. Like a 1-for-1 consistency booster. It can summon Petal or Thorns, depending on your hand. Same with this spell, it searches any Rikka monster on its own, so you can just get your plays started, or you can tribute a plant when you activate this to search a second monster that has the same level as the first. That's the main reason for our kind of strange Rikka ratios over here. For every 3 of we play, there's a 1 of with a different name but the same level. That way we can always use the double search if we want. All of these have some utility, but none of them are essential to the deck. Hellbore can tribute itself from the hand or field to negate a monster effect that targets, and if it's in the graveyard, it can tribute a plant on the field to summon itself in defense. Erica can tribute herself from the hand or field to give any plant a 1k boost for the turn, and if she's in the graveyard, you can summon her whenever you tribute a plant. Cyclamen, meanwhile, is just an 1800 beater. It has a weird level modulation effect as well, and if she's tributed, she summons herself in the end phase, but most of the time I just use her as a normal summonable 1800 beat stick. Now finally, for our generic text, we just got called by the grave as hand trap insurance, since like half of our cards search or summon from the deck, and a single Twin Twisters to out floodgates. There are also more in the side deck in case you need them, along with a bunch of heavy go second cards. This deck is absolutely awful at breaking through established boards, so if you know you have to play into stuff, you're really going to want to bring out the big guns like Nibiru and DRNM. I'd also recommend 2 Erica going second, since she can be really helpful against decks with high attack monsters. And if you want to troll, Spiritual Water Art Oi, which lets you tribute a water monster to look at your opponent's hand and discard a card. All the Rikka are water if you recall, and tributing them will of course trigger Flurries. The only other two cards in here are just some alternate options. Black Garden has potential since it gives you plant tokens to tribute for your effects while lowering your opponent's attack, but despite my best attempts, I couldn't quite get it to work. I'd recommend experimenting with it though. I think you might be able to do something tricky with this if you maybe teched in a few other outside cards. I also played Extravagance for a while because this archetype barely uses the extra deck, but you really need Teardrop to close out games, and oftentimes you'll need two. So getting rid of all three of these with Extravagance really just loses you the duel no matter how many cards you draw. Still, you can put this back in if you want to live dangerously, because most of the extra deck is just for show. Searching with Petal and Summoning with Snowdrop both lock you into plants, so while it is possible to make things like Bahamut Toad with 2 level 4s or Dingirsu with 2 level 8s, it rarely happens unless your game plan has already fallen apart. Likewise, I have Black Ship of Corn and the Sylvan Girl because they just happen to be plant types you can make, but I rarely summon them unless something goes wrong. There's only 3 things in here that I'd highly recommend. The rank 6 Rikka, which offers protection from destruction and gives a little bit of graveyard tomfuckery. The rank 4 Rikka, which lets you detach to add any archetype card from grave to hand, and summons a plant monster out of the extra deck with 1 material when it's tributed. And Fairy Knight Ingunar. This requires 3 level 6 monsters, which is kind of a big investment, but it is doable with Snowdrop and potentially worth it for its effect. You can detach 2 materials to return all other cards on the field to the hand, and your opponent cannot activate cards in response to it. It's rare to bust this out, but against a board of established extra deck monsters, this can win you the game on its own. Everything else in here, just run at your own discretion, do whatever you want, replace it with whatever you're like. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, you can eat your old breakfast cereal. Regardless, there's the deck. Like the video if you liked it, comment if there's any changes you would make, and subscribe if you want more strange deck profiles. I do one of these every other week. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, good luck, and have fun.